Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Stream Watcher training. I'm your host, DJ Shucklehoff, Program Coordinator of Patapsco Heritage Greenway. Hi, everybody. We're going to wait just another minute or so and see if anyone else can join us, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the PhD Stream Watcher Program training. I'm your host, DJ Sheckelhoff, Program Coordinator for Patapsco Heritage Greenway, and I'm happy to lead you in our training tonight. All right, so Patapsco Heritage Greenway is a nonprofit. We are the managing organization for the Patapsco Valley Heritage Area. This is an area that encompasses portions of the Patapsco Valley throughout Sykesville all the way down to the Baltimore City line, including Elkridge, Catonsville, Ellicott City, Daniels, uh, Woodstock, etc. And we are dedicated to preserving, protecting, interpreting, and restoring the environment, history, and culture of the Patapsco Valley. So this involves a lot of volunteer programs. We have been an organization for roughly 20 years now, and we have accomplished quite a bit in that time frame. Of course, this is leaving off the work we've done since 2019, but some pretty impressive numbers here. Over 1 million pounds of trash removed from the Patapsco Valley, over 1,000 trees planted, 30 over 30,000 pounds of invasive plants removed. We've been lucky enough to work with a lot of great volunteers and a community that really loves and appreciates the Patapsco Valley. So we're happy to keep these numbers moving up and keep having an impact on our local ecosystem. Some of these programs include our Streamwatch program, watershed cleanups, volunteer tree plantings, tree maintenances, invasive plant removals, watershed education events, storm drain stenciling, and history and heritage events. All right, starting off, we're going to go with some basics here. What is a watershed? So a watershed is an area of land that drains water from storms, rain, and into the groundwater, streams, rivers, bays, and oceans. It's basically an outlined area where any water or precipitation that falls within that area will drain to a certain location. So for example, we have the Chesapeake Bay watershed. That is the entire region where rainwater, et cetera, will eventually drain down to the Chesapeake Bay. This is a great example because it's huge. It's really important in our local area, Maryland. But it's also, kind of gives you a perspective of how watersheds can be not what you expect them to be. While the Chesapeake Bay itself is, pretty confined to our region and Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia, you can see that the watershed extends all the way up to middle of New York through Pennsylvania, as well as parts of Virginia and West Virginia. A lot bigger than you would expect it to be. So what this also incorporates is that runoff and pollution from anywhere in this region can eventually make its way to the Chesapeake Bay. This makes it really important, even in small areas with little attention, to manage pollution and runoff, because eventually it's just going to make its way out to a larger source and eventually the ocean. So you can imagine this, the map from the last slide is a huge area to cover, but every bit of runoff and trash in that area, entire region is eventually going to impact the Chesapeake Bay without some kind of intervention. So here we got a good example of, runoff, a storm drain. You can see the trash, natural debris as well, and some good sediment there. That's another key thing that will eventually lead through the waterways. Runoff like this can lead to local flooding, especially key in our area around Ellicott City, Catonsville. We've definitely had our fair share of flooding, and we want to do whatever we can to help prevent that. Here's a good example of local flooding, the beloved Snyder's Restaurant on Hammond's Ferry Road in Halethorpe. They have since moved locations, but you can see in a flood area, it is a huge risk. All right, question. What are the two nutrients that are hurting the Chesapeake Bay? So we got nitrogen and phosphorus. These are commonly used in fertilizer, also found in manure, but whether through agricultural use or other sources, they can eventually pass along this cycle of runoff and enter the groundwater and eventually travel through the watershed into larger sources, such as the Chesapeake Bay. And once they get there, and along the way, sometimes they over-enrich the nutrients available in the waterway, and this causes algal blooms. So when these algae grow at an exponential rate and way over their usual capacity, they eventually die off in huge numbers. And as they decompose, oxygen is used up in the water, and this creates anoxic conditions in that localized area of water, which causes huge die-off of aquatic animals, bay grasses, plants, all kinds of organisms living in the bay are killed off through this, and it creates what's called a dead zone. All right, so the Stream Watch program, the main goals are to enlist volunteers such as yourself to go ahead and claim or adopt a segment of stream. This is often an area that you're very familiar with. It could be something that's near your backyard, or you live near, or you just happen to enjoy and hike near. Maybe it's on your way home from work, or an area that you're particularly fond of. But we want to equip people to adopt these areas so that they can both monitor, identify problems in the area, report back to us so that we can give you more resources, or maybe set up a volunteer event there, as well as doing a little bit of hands-on work yourself if you are capable of doing that, to keep these areas safe and protected. All right, real quick, I'm going to get this out of the way. We're talking about trespassing. It will be important to determine if the stream you are looking to adopt is on private property. That's not a problem for us to look up. We can also reach out to the property owner if that is the case, and try and get you permission to, work on that property or section of stream, and we can guide you through that process. Definitely don't want people entering private property. Even if it is a good cause, we want to do this above board and make sure everyone is with the program before we get started. So here are some good examples of successes through our Stream Watchers program. Oftentimes people find piles of trash and signs of dumping along the Patapsco River. A lot of times you can find pockets of trash, such as this one. There's a lot of plastic bottles and typical litter. Here's another example of illegal dumping. Tires are pretty frequent in our area, and they're a major problem. Here's an interesting one, a piano. Can't say that I've seen this one personally, but if you were to see this, we definitely want to know about it, and we can help get rid of that. And some large stuffed animals. You'll always be surprised at what you can find out there, either from dumping or other sources of trash. There are usually some surprising things out there. Another thing to look for is potentially human or more often pet waste. These again are strong sources of nutrients that can get into our waterways and contribute to those algal blooms and dead spots. So, whatever we're comfortable with or capable of, we want to keep these out of the waterways. And maybe that's picking up someone's pet waste bag that they left on the trail and throwing it away for them, but definitely nothing out of your comfort zone. Here's another thing to look for is a lack of bank vegetative cover. This is a growing problem in our area, especially since the recent floods in the last 10 years. With more developed land, we're getting higher levels of runoff water, and that's especially in storm situations, and that's leading to dramatic increases in erosion. And an important barrier to this is vegetative cover, as shown here. So you can see in both of these examples, or in this example on the left, you see trees, healthy plants, and these all have strong root systems throughout the area that helps protect the earth around it from erosion under the water, and especially during storm events, which leads to increased sediment downstream, but also damage to that shoreline there, the stream banks. So here's an example before, and you can see that while this is some good meadow habitat, there's not a whole lot of major shrubbery or trees protecting this streamway. And afterward, here is the results of a volunteer tree planting that can help protect this stream and its banks from further erosion. Here's a good example of bank erosion. Again, this is something we're seeing in dramatic fashion with major storm events. We're seeing just huge levels of runoff water that are unprecedented for the area, and in these major events, it really cuts a huge swath of the bank off, and it just is kind of a feedback loop. It can continue to cut this bank and undermine plants and trees that do exist in the area. So here's another example from just this spring. It's kind of hard to tell from this picture the scale, but this bank loss here is upwards of 20 feet. It's just a huge amount of erosion on this really small stream. So this is definitely something you'd want to report back to us so that we can, notify the proper authorities and, get some attention on a stream like this. All right, moving on to invasive plants. Invasive plants are a major threat to the Patapsco Valley ecosystem. These are plants that have been introduced through unnatural means that can be, landscaping, hitching a ride on various forms of transportation, but generally they're plants from other countries, other continents that are not native to our ecosystem. And because of this, they don't have native predators, they don't have any animals that eat them, and they are often not restricted by the typical nutrient limitations of an area. This allows them to grow explosively. There's a great picture here. You can see this invasive vine has just completely enveloped the trees in this grove. A lot of times people look at this and they think, oh, look, it's thriving, it's green, it's beautiful. But really, this is a nightmare for our native trees and our forest canopy. All those native trees perform a lot of important functions for our ecosystem, and all the trees here in this picture are being choked out and will eventually die over a number of years because they cannot access sunlight anymore and will just be smothered. So rather than rattling off a bunch of pictures and everything to try and memorize as fast as you can, I'm going to talk about a couple quick patterns that you can look for while you're out along the Patapsco. And by looking for these patterns, you can usually hone in on invasive species throughout the Patapsco Valley without needing to specifically identify them while you're in the field. And then you can either take a picture or mark down your location. You can report it back to us. You can email me personally, and I will help you identify this plant, get you the resources you need to help fight these invasives, or work from there. We really appreciate everyone reporting invasive plant locations so that we can continue to work on this problem. So these three patterns we're going to look for. First off is coloring. Invasive plants tend to bloom, grow, shed leaves at different times than their native counterparts throughout the year. This often leads them to have a different color from their surrounding native counterparts. Good example here on the right. This is English ivy. I believe this is on Frederick Road in Catonsville, if anyone recognizes it. You can see this English ivy has grown up the side of all these trees, is beginning to smother and kill off this grove of trees. But you can see it here in winter, it's a very different color. English ivy stays green throughout the winter seasons, and against the gray brown of the leafless trees, it really pops out. So in this setting, you can really notice it quickly and identify that pattern as an invasive plant. Another thing is density. Again, because they don't have native predators and often grow explosively, they tend to grow in very dense patches, whereas their native counterparts are, they're fighting tooth and nail within the ecosystem to grow as much as they can, but it often happens sporadically, only in places that fit for them. Location. Often invasive plants are introduced through human interference, whether that's, falling off seeds attached to hikers, seeds attached to vehicles, construction, or trail interference from trails that allows them to find a niche so that they can start getting a foothold in area. That's locations that you'll usually find them, such as this example here, sandwiched between two parking lots. There's a lot of interference and transition in this area that allowed the English ivy to take hold. So again, the coloring, good example here on the right. This is invasive barberry. This plant often takes on these reddish hues in the bark, stems, and leaves throughout the year. And obviously this reddish hue is nothing we don't normally see in the Patapsco Valley, but usually when we're seeing this, it's in the beautiful foliage in the fall. It's when our trees have turned color, and it's in the cooler months. You don't usually see this on our trees in spring and early summer. So it's a good example of invasive plant kind of following a different schedule, and because of that, its coloring being pretty different and noticeable within our ecosystem. Another one is density. As mentioned before, native plants are limited by a lot of things: local stressors, nutrient limits, available sunlight, etc. This causes them to grow more sparsely. But if you look closely on the right, there are these patches here. And I believe this is, again, invasive barberry, but they just tend to grow in these incredibly dense thickets they're only able to do because they're invasive, and they don't have the same regulators that their native counterparts do. So if you see plants growing in especially dense thickets or patterns, it could be an indicator that you should take a picture, report the plant, or maybe look it up. And again, location. Here's another great example on your way into Catonsville. This is an edge of a bamboo thicket, but you can see next to the roadway a simple seed or plant can fall off some kind of vehicle or something and get started. Um, and it often finds an easy space or niche to get a foothold because there's an edge there between human interference and native habitat, between the road and what is the remaining forest there. There's a gap of just simple grass or dirt that allows the invasive to take hold and explode from there. So yeah, real quick, location, coloring, and density are some patterns to look out for with invasive species. And before we move on, we also have an entire webinar dedicated specifically to invasive plants, how to identify them, a handful of common local invasives. So if you're interested in that, we will definitely provide a link and pathways for you to learn more. Okay, vernal pools. So vernal pools are dynamic habitats that tend to be cyclical in nature throughout the seasons. They have periodic dry times as well as times where they swell. And these are pools usually found in woodlands, in forested areas, but they are specifically isolated from permanent surface waters. So this is not necessarily a pond, that is adjacent to, part of a Patapsco tributary or a stream that is constantly flowing, but it's something that is isolated from that so that it doesn't have your typical fish and larger predators that you find in more permanent water fixtures. And that makes them very important biological communities for our ecosystem. And here are some great examples of why they're so important. A lot of people think that vernal pools may be blamed for the rise in mosquito populations, but they're actually net negative on mosquito populations for the area. You can see here good examples of some eggs. Some frog and salamander eggs are very common in vernal pools, and it's important for our ecosystem that these populations of mosquito predators are, able to have the habitat to reproduce and grow their populations as we roll into spring and summer months. It's a very important role that the vernal pool plays in our ecosystem. All right, so we're going to move into stream emergency issues. So these are things that if you were to see on your adopted stream, we'd want you to report as soon as possible so that we can get attention to them immediately. So open sewer lids. This is a big one. This is, partially a success story for our program. After the major floods in Ellicott City and Catonsville, stream watchers were actually able to report open sewer lids and several sewer line breaks that had made contact with the Patapsco River to us, and we were able to get the word back out to the proper authorities. So they were able to address these issues. An example here of some sewage overflow. This is a huge problem. As you can imagine, it dumps a lot of nutrients into the water and really does a number on the water quality. Obviously, you don't want anyone near the water downstream of one of these for quite some time. So if anyone is to find one, definitely let us know as soon as possible so we can minimize this as much as possible. This also includes water main breaks, another important thing to notify the authorities on. Also, massive debris dams. These are not quite as common, but you can kind of see a theme here. A lot of the stuff we're talking about tonight is dealing with the remains of major storm events and the damages that they can cause in the waterways. The one is exposed utilities. This goes hand in hand with that increased erosion and stream bank loss that I've been talking about. You can see here that this culvert has been exposed, it's been eroded behind it, and that's something that's going to need to be addressed. Another example of a leaking sewer line. Thankfully, this example specifically is a line that was no longer in use. Um, but a lot of times the infrastructure of sewage lines can be pretty old. And at times you can find leaks or exposed holes in the pipes, and that's something we want to get eyes on as soon as possible. Another big one is clogged or damaged outflow pipes. This is big for flooding. It can be big for flooding, upstream. If this outflow pipe is clogged with trash, not only is that trash going to continue eventually down our waterways, but it can prevent the proper drainage from whatever is upstream, which can lead to flooding. Another one is sediment control failures. You may recognize these sediment fences that are mandated from in construction areas. That's to keep excessive runoff during storm events from all the exposed dirt and land during construction. But at times these fences can fall, they can fail. So if you see one such as this that has clearly failed and is just, draining wild amounts of sediment into the water, definitely let us know and we can get someone on that. So not always that common, but sometimes people can come upon illicit discharge. This can be illegal dumping of pollutants or drainage of pollutants. Sometimes it comes in the form of oil runoff or something maybe larger that can, change the color of the water. But real quick, we're going to go over something that is often reported, but actually isn't a big problem. And that is iron bacteria. You can see a good example on the left here. It often has kind of a rust color, but it has a shiny sheen that people often mistake for oil, but is actually just the iron-eating bacteria. And the iron-eating bacteria is not a problem ecologically. So a quick way to kind of differentiate these is maybe take a stick or a small rock, and if you break up that sheen, if it stays broken up and kind of floats off in different sections, it is most likely iron bacteria. But if it immediately recongeals into one, a kind of smooth sheen, it is likely oil. So that would be something you want to report. Here's another good example. You can see kind of this white foam. This is something people often see throughout the Patapsco, but it isn't always as bad as it looks. Sometimes this comes from natural sources, such as decomposing leaves, twigs, or other organic substances upstream. If it appears light or brown, but has like an earthy, fishy smell, that can be an indicator that this is a natural foam. It often occurs in eddies or little offshoots of streams or slower sections of tributaries, and accumulates as the water slows there. And it will definitely increase after heavy rainfall or other situations in which more organic content is dumped into waterways. Another example, you can just see kind of little bits of white foam, and then here on the left, kind of collection as the water is caught in this area or the foam gets caught. You can see it kind of collecting there. Whereas man-made sources of foam tend to be much more stark white, definitely have a different smell to them, usually fragrant or perfumed, especially if they're coming from car washing, any major soaps or detergents. But particularly anything from a sewer line or septic field, you're going to know that it's from a sewer line or septic field. Usually you're going to be able to smell that within 20 feet of the stream, and it will be pretty easy to tell. Now, this is a huge problem. So you can see this stream here is wildly discolored. Almost the entire stream looks bright white. This is clearly a huge issue. You may not find this to be the case. Hopefully, not many of you find cases such as this, but sometimes if you do a little more detective work and head upstream, again, not trespassing, but within your abilities, if you head upstream, you may be able to find some source of the problem that you can also report back to us. So some other common examples, cigarette butts can take 18 months to 10 years to biodegrade. They're often a source of trash that you find in, your waterway washed down. Old pool water being drained into the storm drain. All of this is going to end up in the waterways. Something to keep an eye on. Dumpsters are a huge problem for trash getting into our waterways and eventually flowing down through the watershed, especially during storm events, windy days. You can pretty much count on dumpsters, trash cans, everything kind of losing a handful of their trash and that making its way into our waterways. Particularly commercial areas that have permanent dumpsters. These always periodically lose some trash in storms, and it will make its way to your waterways. So if your particular adopted stream crosses behind commercial areas with dumpsters, it's a good thing to keep your eye on. Again, overflowing dumpsters, leaf dumping, particularly in the fall, something to keep an eye on. And here's a handful of other things that can be, kind of red flags in your watershed, your smaller watershed of your adopted stream. A lot of times, if there are auto related businesses, sometimes, this can be a source of tires in the area or other dumping occurrences. Construction sites on the bottom, other, maybe restaurants or businesses that deal with oil, other pollutants that can make their way into the watershed. Again, just more examples of, red flags and sources of pollution that you are likely to find in your area, depending on where you monitor. This is one that, not everyone realizes is an important threat to our waterways is over salting. We as in the county and local government uses salt to prevent slick roads in the winter, but when it's used excessively, all that salt does end up wearing down and being washed away into our waterways, and that can become a deadly pollutant in our water. And does a lot of damage to our aquatic life, vegetation, and even land wildlife. So especially in the spring and winter, if you see examples like in this picture of just excessive clumps of road salt and grit, you can let us know and we can try and remove that before it gets into the waterways. Another key detail is that stream watchers help us plan our volunteer event season. So when we are able to get, a group of volunteers out to parts of the Patapsco, you never know what we'll find, but we also often come up with great numbers. As we mentioned before, we pulled over 1 million pounds of trash out of the Patapsco in the last 2 decades. And that usually means thousands of pounds of trash each season. And we really count on our Stream Watch team to point out problem areas, places that we need to address. We need to bring volunteers out and help clean up for maximum effect. All right, a very important slide here, Stream Watcher safety. So when you're out monitoring your stream, it's a good idea to bring a first aid kit, wear rubber gloves, maybe boots, waterproof boots. You're going to want a safety vest, which we will provide all registered stream watchers for free. Definitely avoid touching any hazardous liquids, objects. If you see any of these examples of pollution, any dangerous litter, scrap metal, anything that is, especially anything that is out of your comfort zone, don't feel pressured to try and tackle that yourselves. Anything in that arena, feel free to report to us, and we can either handle it ourselves or notify the proper authorities. It's a good idea to carry a cell phone. You might not have service everywhere, but it can always be helpful. If you're going on private land, you want to check with the owner for permission. You can just let us coordinate that if you'd like. It's a good idea to tell a friend where you are, or maybe bring a friend with you. Safety in numbers. Helps to bring a trash bag for just some light litter pickup. It doesn't have to be a full contractor bag. You don't have to pull 50 pounds of trash behind you on your hike. If you can just pick up here and there, every little bit helps. And be careful supervising any children that go with you. Again, don't overdo it while you're out there, especially alone. And you're going to want to use bug spray, maybe some sunscreen, and always check for ticks. Ticks are, a major concern in the Patapsco Valley, especially through the summer months. So definitely check for ticks when you get home. All right, documentation. So here's a really important feature of our Streamwatch program, and that is this helps us connect to our stream watchers and to the Patapsco Valley itself, so that we know what's going out there, on the ground, and we can properly apply the resources that we have to protect our ecosystem. So this includes our Streamwatch volunteer application waiver, which I will send out after this training, as well as online reports of the date of your stream watching, the pounds of trash you may have removed, definitely photos. I understand not everyone has a smartphone maybe, but cameras are much more accessible now and pretty easy to bring with you, whether that is your smartphone or otherwise. Photos really help us, get an easy document of what's going on there out in the field, and help translate, what we need to bring to the site. GPS coordinates, if possible, whether that is, with a GPS device or just going back on Google Maps and retracing your steps and just giving us an approximate location. We also have a visual survey that can help document everything you see out there. And again, if you're going on private property, the right of entry and liability agreement that we will provide, as well as maybe verbal permission. But if you don't want to deal with that, definitely just reach out to us and we can handle all of that for you. All right, why we need you to check in every time you walk the stream. Again, this just helps us, stay in tune with, your efforts and maximize the impact that your volunteering has with us and with the Patapsco watershed. We appreciate everything you do every time you go out to monitor your stream, and we want to give you the most for that contribution. So the more you report back to us, the more we can support you and make the most of all this new information. So now you can enter this data directly online. We have a link here on our website. You can again find that, just browsing through our website or through this direct link on our environmental page. And this hosts all of the forms, allows you to submit pictures and everything else for your Streamwatch experiences. And here you can see next to this green arrow is where you're going to want to click to submit your visual survey after doing a walk of your stream. And the blue arrow indicates the Streamwatcher activity form, which you'll also want to fill out. So these just have some basic questions, about water flow, the levels of water, any odors you may notice while you're out along your stream, as well as some basic documentation of your name, number, email, watershed, and any trash or other things you may have grabbed while you were out. We also have the opportunity to utilize the Water Reporter app. I'm not sure if anyone here has experience with this, but this is a smartphone app that allows for citizen scientists such as yourself to record GPS location, photos, comments, notes, everything with your smartphone while you're out in the field. Really just important to include the hashtag Patapsco Streamwatch tag so that we can find these reports later. Here's an example of a use of the Water Reporter app. You can see screenshots of the app here. It allows you to create a post and then set your location, and then add pictures, comments, anything else to help document what you found in the field. And I understand not everyone may want to use this as their source of documentation, but it can be very handy if you feel comfortable with it. So feel free to give it a try. Also, so if you are interested in tracking vernal pools, we are specifically also looking for information on location and several attributes of vernal pools throughout the Patapsco watershed. And we're asking people to look for, these kind of fields here, the area size, whether with a large tape measure or counting your steps around the pool just for an approximation, depth, or you measure with a stick or something, anything available, the land use type, any nearby development, canopy cover, the portion of the sky that is covered by the existing trees, local vegetation, and maybe any animals that you observe in the vernal pool. This is all very important information ecologically for the Patapsco watershed, and we have a specific form on our website for inputting any data you do find or record on vernal pools. You can see that link here. That will also be sent out following the training. So thank you for helping us protect the Patapsco River watershed. PHG does a lot of work throughout the watershed, and none of it would be possible without volunteers like yourself, whether that's in the Streamwatch program or at volunteer events specifically. So we really appreciate any contribution you can make with your time to help us protect this watershed that we all know and love. So next steps, if you're ready to adopt your stream, go ahead and send me an email. Just let me know some basic information, as well as your filled out sign up form, and I can get you either assigned or matched to your intended stream area. So we can go ahead and get rolling and keep an eye on your favorite part of Patapsco. Also, once you submit this, I will be sure to get you a free Patapsco hat and safety vest for use during your stream watching. We will also keep you tuned for upcoming news, special events exclusive to the Stream Watcher program, volunteers, and other upcoming activities with Patapsco Heritage Greenway. So here is my information. You can feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions, if you would like to participate. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and check out our website. Now, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and throw those in a Q&A, and I will be happy to answer them. No questions? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We appreciate you participating in this stream launcher training, and definitely feel free to shoot me an email if you have any other questions, if you're interested, and if you would like to fill out the form and go ahead and get started with us. All right. Have a good night, and we'll talk soon, hopefully. Take care.